If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Truckers, what's your craziest rest stop story? When I was really young, like elementary/primary school, and my family was moving into another state due to military stuff, and we had everything in 2 moving trucks, including our pets. We pulled into a truck stop for the night. My father opened his door and our cat ran off under the big rigs. There was like 40 big trucks there. One of the truckers saw, apparently truckers are all best friends or something, but most of the truckers got out and helped look for the cat. That was pretty crazy, a couple kids, their mom and dad, and 40 truckers with flashlights looking for a cat. Story from my recently deceased great uncle, who was a trucker for most of his life. One day at a rest stop in Texas, he decides to kill some time by shooting at a 55-gallon drum with his 12-gauge Wingmaster 870. He's blasting some holes with high brass, when 2 state troopers come speeding up. He sees them jump out, he lowers his shotgun and just watches them approach. As they near him, one draws his duty weapon and hands it to my uncle, saying, "Here, take some shots with this." My uncle hands him his shotgun and they take turns shooting the barrel until they get bored. Then they say their goodbyes. My uncle hops in his truck and heads on his way. Just one of many, many memorable stories he had. This was back in the mid-80s. I was on an assignment which took me across the country and sometimes I had to hitchhike. The 80s were a bit different than today. I was stranded on a hot and dusty road in Texas at the dead of night. I was walking to the nearest town when after a few hours a large 18-wheeler came up on me. I signaled and they graciously stopped and let me on. It was an older lady. She didn't even really acknowledge me hopping in the cab. I said thank you and chuckled. The mood was a bit tense and I wasn't quite sure what this lady's deal was. I started to make small talk and then she interrupts me and starts telling me this story about how on that same night a decade back she saw this horrific accident on the same stretch of road we were on. She went into graphic detail about how foggy it was and how there was a very loud crashing noise. I think she may have witnessed it happen. She starts getting really emotional in an angry way and I can tell she is coming undone, not quite sure what to think. She then leans over to me and says that when they pulled the driver out of the car after the wreck, their face and head was all mangled, and I kid you not she turns to me and goes like this. And contorts her face and makes a weird noise. It was frightening in the what the fuck kind of way. Anyways, this is enough stranger weirdness for me, so I ask for her to let me off at the next stop, which was this truck stop. When I hop out, she yells, "Make sure to tell him Large Marge sent ya." And she lets out this outrageous cackle. I kinda shrug it off, and hurry into the safety of the truck stop. The real kicker is when I'm in the stop, I get into a conversation and tell them the story and say that Large Marge sent me, and the whole place went quiet. It really gave me the creeps. I really only have fond memories of truck stops. My papa was a driver for a long time, and over my weekends, breaks, and holidays as a child I've visited every continental state at least once. As I was very young, I don't have many memories that stick out, but I have one that I remember Papa laughed about all the time. Because he was trucking with a very young girl, he made some investments into what he kept in his cab. The truck stop we were at was little more than a glorified set of indoor showers with a small shop for necessities and an arcade, but it was a very busy one with a big lot that was always full. So we stopped there for a while. I was asleep when we arrived. I woke up, climbed out of the cab, and there's a crowd of like 20 grown-ass men standing in silence at a decent distance as my papa, not a small man by any means, sits there on the pavement with a little griddle making a giant ass stack of pancakes. Just standing in silence, staring. As soon as I got out and sleepily walked around to that side of the truck, the silence broke into a chorus of "Oh, I get it nows, that's dedication, brothers," and laughter. It's a fond but odd memory. I was supposed to inherit that truck. It's a shame he shut the business down before I was old enough to take it over from him. Candy apple red Peterbilt, though I can't remember the model for the life of me. It's been too long. Frown, I feel like my life would be a lot different if I'd taken it over after him. I miss it. Not a trucker. Childhood friend was a trucker and heroin addict. Here's his experience in Detroit. Motel room, friend, we'll call him Jones, another friend, call him Shane, set their alarm an hour early so they can shoot up before getting back on the road. Flawless plan, right? Shane shoots up first. Jones shoots up second and decides to take a shower. Shane shoots up again. Jones gets out of the shower and notices Shane passed out on the bed. No biggie, Jones continue to get ready. Half hour before they need to leave, Jones goes to wake Shane. Shane's not waking. Shane's now frothy at the mouth and lightly convulsing. Jones, not risking his lifelong friendoding, calls 911. First to show 5 minutes later is a Detroit PD. He takes a look around and says to Jones, throw all your contraband in this bag, keep it in that corner covered. EMS will be here shortly, followed by my supervisor. Don't say shit other than you found him like this. 5 minutes later, paramedics come in. Big ass needle of adrenaline to Shane's chest. Shane is up. EMS is cleaning up and leaving a total of 10 minutes after they got there. PD supervisor comes in as EMS is ready to bounce. Cop, EMS, and sup all chat for about 5 minutes, chat to Shane and Jones briefly and then all leave. No charges, just prick the junkie and make sure he isn't dead. Craziest part of all, this happened so goddamn quickly that Shane and Jones were able to leave on time for work without being late. Detroit must deal with quite a bit of heroin odds because they were in and out faster than a Jiffy Lube oil change. I was super tired. Pulled into a rest stop about 7 a.m. Go to the bathroom, notice there aren't any urinals. Think that's weird? Must be a Virginia thing. Sit down. Start pooping, loudly. Notice shoes next to my stall. Guy next to me is super quiet. Keep grunting and spraying, mild diarrhea. Finish, keep wiping and flushing. I have a hairy ass, don't always take time to shave it. Anyway, get out, wash hands, leave restroom and go back to truck and go to bed. Wake up about 8 hours later, go into restroom and realize I am headed for the woman's. Do a 180 and see the men's sign. As I am pissing in a urinal, I remember last night and start laughing loudly. Finish up, then go back to truck and tell my wife. We had a good laugh. That's the craziest I've got. I'm no trucker, but I have slept in a gang of rest stops. The only one that really stands out is the last one. I was on a road trip to Tahoe and it was about 3 a.m. so I decided to stop. I went to the restroom and when I came out there were these two coyotes that were running around. I tried to throw something at them but they just ran in circles around me. I just strolled back to my car and leaned the seat back when it sounded like something brushing up against the car, so I sat up to see at least 25 coyotes running in circles around my Jeep. Those fuckers were watching me the whole time, and definitely could have taken me if they wanted to. My father-in-law has driven a truck for 30 years or so. He was stopped in Arkansas once, sleeping his rest period away. This man hates being woken up, hates it. Well, he is sound asleep and is awoken by taps at the door. He tells the lot lizard to go away. 30 seconds later she taps again, same scene, he says go away a little louder this time. He gets just about back to sleep and hears the tapping again. So he opens his door and loudly tells her to go away. She asks him if he wants to buy a VCR. This is a common occurrence, he assures me. So he responds, do you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and starts to close his door thinking he shut her up. She responds, yes, I do. He stops mid-door close and looks at this lady like a cow looking at a new gate. He is dumbfounded. He said his brain wasn't really working because of sleep, but he was sure he heard her say yes. So he asked her what she said. She says, yes, I know JC, I'm sorry I woke you. I am an undercover cop, then shows him her badge. She asked how long he would be in the truck stop, and when he tells her he has some more hours to sleep off, she makes a mark on his door with some sort of invisible marker. They were doing stings in that lot and several others and would be rotating out officers, and she didn't want him to get woken up again. He said that's the first time he has ever had a cop knock on his door. As a man that has reached the ripe old age of 48, I can promise you I have seen some shit go down. This one totally takes the cake for me though. I was waiting out front of a truck stop back in the mid-80s. Sitting on a park bench with a guy that had a big Rottweiler kinda dog on a leash with him. I tried to make small talk, but he was quite a sourpuss. So we sat in silence for a few minutes until the most unexpected thing I have ever seen happened right before my very eyes. While we were sitting there, a big 18-wheeler pulls in without a trailer, bobtail, so he parks right up front like a normal car would. Inside the cab of the truck with the driver is a little monkey. The dance for the organ grinder kind. I think they are called rhesus monkeys perhaps. Well, the dog spots this lil monkey and proceeds to go apeshit over it. Lunging at the end of his leash and barking at the top of his lungs. Generally making a real spectacle of himself, to say the least. The driver is obviously upset, but not nearly as much as the monkey is. Actually, upset may be the wrong adjective to use for the monkey though. In retrospect, I think eagerly aggressive may be a more appropriate description for his disposition. He was pacing the dashboard back and forth, never taking his eyes off of this very aggravating dog. The driver opens his little triangle window that they don't make on cars anymore. The ones made for smokers back in the day. He yells out to this douchebag to call his dog off because it is upsetting his monkey. The guy laughs and says, no way, I told you he was a jerk, didn't I? Says that his dog ain't bothering nobody. The dog hasn't shut up since he laid eyes on the monkey. I promise you he is bothering everybody for several blocks around. Now here's where things start to get interesting. The driver says that if he doesn't call his dog off, he's gonna let his monkey loose on that dog. Douchebag laughs and says that his dog would eat that monkey alive. Upon hearing this, the driver leans over and reaches into his glove box, I guess. Pulls out one of those tiny baseball bats like you use to get at Astroworld or carnivals, and places it in the monkey's hand. The monkey obviously knows what's about to go down because he is now trying to squeeze out of that little triangular window I mentioned earlier. This monkey has murder in his eyes if I have ever seen it. Driver hollers, "Last chance to save your dog's ass, man." In response, douchebag lets his dog off of the leash. Now we have a situation that has escalated to the point where we have a dog jumping up at the window and a monkey screaming profanities right back at him. Well, the driver finally rolls down the regular window and out leaps all kinds of miniature primate hell. The dog never knew what hit him. Quick as a flash, this monkey is riding on the back of this dog's neck. His two back feet all wrapped up in his neck fur with one hand hanging onto an ear. The other hand, as you may have guessed by now, is steadily and mercilessly raining down blows about this dog's head and face. I mean hard blows. You can hear them whop whop whop. Well, it only took a moment for the dog to realize he was in way over his head. He bolts yelping bloody murder as he runs away at full speed. I mean, this dog is running so fucking hard he's throwing up tufts of grass and dirt as soon as he leaves pavement. The monkey's still riding him and beating on him the whole time. Douchebag acts like he wants to fight now, but several people including myself stepped in to stop that nonsense. In a couple of minutes or so, the little monkey comes loping back with his little bat still in hand, and leaps up into the still open window of the truck to await his master, who has gone on into the store. That wanker ran off to try to go find his dog, I don't know if he ever did. My ride showed up and I had to go. As I got into the car, I noticed that it wasn't really a car, it was an 8-story tall monster from the Paleolithic era, and I started to get suspicious. It was my first week's trucking. My gut wasn't used to large amounts of caffeine and shitty truck stop food yet. It was a dark and quiet night when I felt was the worst case of diarrhea brewing in my belly. I whip out the truck stop handbook, and the nearest fuel stop is over 40 miles away. A few minutes down the road, my prayers are met with a sign, "Rest area 3 miles." I think to myself, I got this. I hope, as my tummy starts rumbling again. A few minutes later, I'm pulling into a rest area. Way too fast, good thing is empty, take up 2 spots and hit the brakes rolling as I rushed out the cab. I'm carefully walking, clenching my ass cheeks, trying not to shit my pants. I make it to the bathroom at last. It's spotless clean, the handicap spot is open, and it has TP. I drop my pants, turn around and release Satan's gate as I'm sitting. For a whole minute straight, I let out the loudest, smelliest fart that has came from my body. I had no clue I could fart that loud for that long. The sound echoed off the walls, my poor anus was battered and sore. I sat there for another 15 minutes waiting to shit, but only more gas came out until the feeling completely receded. The toilet bowl didn't have anything other than water in it, and a quick wipe confirmed I was clean. The walk back to the truck seemed so much shorter. I only wish someone could have witnessed that glorious fart solo. I asked my dad this question. We both drive together now, but he's a 26-year-old trucking veteran of the industry. This is what he told me. This was some years ago. He pulled into a rest area one afternoon to take a nap and make himself something to eat. Normal rest area, nothing out of the ordinary. There's one spot left and he pulls in and he realizes most of the trucks there are all for a circus. There is one spot left on the very far end and he takes it. The truck next to him is hauling a very unique load. The tractor had the logo for the circus and the trailer was covered in a tarp, but the side flap had been pulled up. Through the exposed tarp, he could see below it were the bars to a cage. Inside the cage were 2 Bengal tigers. Just sitting there chilling about. At eye level. I guess you never realize how big these cats are. Bengal tigers are very, very large. I guess being less than 5 feet from something that could eat you was just too freaky for him because he decided he could make it to the next rest area and boogied it out of there. My parents have owned a truck stop for the last 11 years and I've worked there with them on and off since I was 14, 25 now. By far the craziest thing I've seen happened a few years ago when we got a lot more snow than the area is used to. At about noon on the second day of snowfall, the DOT for the state shut down the highway. Our parking lot started filling up instantly and within the hour, we were full with no room to squeeze another car, let alone a semi in. We put out a "Sorry, parking lot full" sign in the entrance alongside directions to follow the signs to an empty grocery store parking lot for the overflow. We thought that we'd done all we could and went back to normal duties at the station. An hour goes by and I hear a truck horn blasting over and over again. Look outside and there it's a semi-truck trying to inch into the parking lot, dragging along with its wheels the causation tape, full parking lot sign and neon orange cones. I ran outside and had to yell at the driver to stop. He finally rolls down his window and starts yelling at me for putting hazards in the road. I told him that the hazards were there to let him know the parking lot was full. He proceeds to yell at me that he can see space to park right there. I tell him that the leftover space is for trucks to leave when the highway opens. He gets out of his truck and starts screaming at me about how I'm being a racist by not letting him park in the available space because he is white. He then gets into his truck and starts to move forward into the lot. There are 4/5 people by this time telling him he can't go in and he just ignores us. Thankfully a cop car comes up and stops to ask us what all the noise was about. The moment the driver sees the cop, he stops honking his damn horn and tells the cop that he is just trying to park his truck and we won't let him. Cop tells him he is an idiot and follows him to the other parking lot. He came back and gave me his card in case we had any other trouble. I posted this months ago, and it turned out to be very popular. True story. So, when I was working for a logging company, I rode shotgun on a logging truck to pick up some extra hours. Turns out, theft of trucks was a big deal, even timber trucks. We're passing through Tennessee and hit a rest stop. The driver takes 40 winks and I hit the bathroom. In one stall, 2 furries are having rabid sex. Another stands guard at the door and stares at me while I walk in. I didn't know what to do. I was so taken by surprise, that we stared at each other for a solid 30 seconds, all the while you hear the thrushing of wet sex just feet away. Suddenly, 2 more furries run into the bathroom. The time is now. They screamed. I was sure they were going to kill me. The time is now, the time is now. They rush out of the bathroom, not even acknowledging my existence. The pitcher and catcher run pants around ankles, flopping freely in the wind. A flatbed truck rushes to the door. 2 more pop out. They bring jacks and crowbars and hoist the vending machines into the flatbed. Once done, they get in the truck and go. I look at our truck, and the driver is pissing himself laughing. Turns out, the logging company owned the vending machines, and those crazy fuckers punked the hell out of me. In the mid-90s my dad was a long-haul trucker. One night he pulled into a truck stop in Detroit. He got out of the truck, went into the restaurant and had dinner. When he came back to his truck, he opened the door and climbed into the driver's seat. Immediately he felt something strange, like he was sitting in someone's lap. He jumped out of the truck and saw a man sitting in the cab, wearing blue coveralls. He thought he was being robbed, so he yelled into the truck that whoever was in there better come out with his hands up, as my dad never left the truck without his nickel-plated .357. After a couple of minutes, no one came out, there was no movement in the truck, so my dad decided he was going to go in and get the son of a bitch. After opening the passenger door and looking inside, he realized that there was nobody in the truck. After a long sleepless night and an evening longer drive back to California, he finally arrived back at the yard. After turning in his paperwork, he told one of the dispatchers about what had happened. The dispatcher turned pale white. He pulled my dad aside and asked him to verify the number on the truck. After he verified which truck it was, the dispatcher went even more pale. He told my dad that the truck he was driving was previously assigned to a white guy who always wore blue coveralls, who got robbed and murdered, stabbed, in that very same truck, in Detroit, 2 years to the day that my dad was there. My dad is a no BS kind of guy, so when he told me the story it changed everything I thought I knew about death. Not a trucker, but I pulled into a rest stop around midnight. I was towing a trailer, so pulled up where the trucker park. I noticed a dude hanging out behind the bathroom. Each time a trucker would pull in he would run behind the bathroom over behind another building. I couldn't quite make out what he was up to, but I swear he was jerking off in view of the trucker that pulled up. Assuming he wanted an invite or something. After 30 minutes of watching this, texting a buddy what I was seeing, a young girl maybe 18 pulls up right in front of the guy. Gets out of her car and walks to the bathroom. I see him heading that way also. I jump out of my car and head towards the bathroom thinking I am going to hear her screaming. I get close to the bathroom and here he comes walking out of the bathroom. I yell at him and he just takes off running. I was like, WTF, did he just slit her throat or something? Seconds later I hear the toilet flush. I yell in there if she is okay. She comes out confused. I explain the situations to her. She didn't see the guy. I assume she thinks now I am some kind of freak. I call 911 and she takes off. 20 minutes later the cops show up. Look in all the parked cars for the guy. Don't think they ever found him. Strange thing, there was a guy parked right in front of this bathroom with his dome light on the whole time going over some paperwork and never saw any of it. This happened on I-5 just north of Eugene or on the S-bound lanes. I was driving to northern Michigan from southern Indiana. It was a 12-hour drive, so I left at 9 p.m. to drive through the night. Stopped at a rest stop around 2 a.m., and went in to handle a good midnight poo. Bathroom is empty, as I expected, so I walk into the far side of the men's room. It was divided into two separate sides, and settle in about halfway down the row of stalls. Then I hear the door. No big deal, everybody poops. Then it gets weird. I hear this person walk in the other half of the men's room, then back out and into my side. They then walk slowly, but quite obviously purposefully, to the stall next to mine. Some of you see where this is going. I was not one of those people. He walks in and sits. No door closing. No pants dropping or belt buckle clanging. Just sitting. I think this is odd, but write it off as unfounded paranoia. So about 5 minutes goes by, and the guy stands up, walks out and stands there. I assume, desperately hope, he's just fixing his hair in the mirror. That's when I look up. His eye is in the slit of my doorway, looking right back at me. We lock eyes, and I am frozen. Hoping he notices and breaks, I keep staring. He doesn't, so I say something. Can I help you, pal? You want a blowjob? Now, I understand that there is a scene where this is a thing that happens. While I am not one who subscribes to this particular hobby, I'm sure there's a certain etiquette involved. This was clearly not the case here. So, whatever it was, fear or anger, I don't know, but I snapped. No, I don't want a goddamn blowjob. Get the fuck out of here. Now. He kind of scrambles out and my poo is completely ruined at this point. I rush out, watching my corners and doorways for creepy McDoor peeker. He's just leisurely strolling back to his car while I am almost running. Anyway, called the cops. They arrested him for whatever that would be called. Never looked up the police report or anything. It was the rest stop at mile 250 on Interstate 69. Always nervous in public pisser since. Not a trucker, but a funny rest stop story. My dad, my uncle, and a couple of their friends were out hunting in West Virginia for a week, and they were coming back to camp after a day of hunting and drinking. Well, they see a deer on the side of the road out in the middle of nowhere, so my uncle grabs his rifle, kills it, and they throw it into the back of the van and head off for the nearest place where they can gut this thing. They didn't want to be arms deep in a poached animal on the side of a road. So they head to this little used rest stop, and seeing as how it was pretty late and no one was there, they could string this thing up from the monkey bars, gut it quick, and get out of there before anyone pulled up. So they do just that, and they throw the deer in the back, and my uncle goes inside to wash up as the others wait in the car. Right as my uncle heads into the bathroom though, this guy and his 6-year-old son pull up to use the bathroom. So the dad and son walk in and see my burly, redneck uncle coated in blood up to his elbows, washing off a bloody knife in the sink, and without breaking his pace or saying a word, the dad casually grabs his son's shoulder and made a 180 right out the door. My uncle finished washing up quick after that, and everyone dipped out before that guy could call the cops about the serial killer at the truck stop. When I was a child, my family took a road trip to California. Late at night, we ended up stopped in traffic on the interstate leading into Albuquerque. After about an hour, my mom got out to talk with some people up ahead who had also gotten out of their cars. She came back a little while later crying. A trucker told her that there was a rest stop a few miles ahead where a man had just shot his son and decapitated him, and leading the cops on a chase with his son's head in the car. We were stuck there another 3 hours before they let traffic through. Not a trucker, but here's a rest stop story. Maybe one of those you had to be there stories, but anyway. Was on vacation once, don't remember where we were. I recall it was about 10 o'clock in the morning and we wheeled into a rest stop. Nobody around. Place was dead. Down at the far end of the parking slots was a bright red Mazda Miata with the top down. Curious, I walked down a ways to see what might be up. Sitting in the driver's seat was a beautiful blonde woman, dead asleep. Slumped over against the door, her 2-foot-long hair was all spilled out across the outside of the door. She was so utterly asleep her mouth was hanging open with a big trail of drool running out. Sitting in the passenger seat was the biggest Great Dane I have ever seen. He was sitting on the seat, resting his head on the windshield bow, carefully watching me. I didn't approach closer than about 20 feet. Figured that was close enough. I am a man of compassion. I believe that. I always have, I always will. Human beings are not perfect creatures, and we all should understand that. They are physically, mentally, and emotionally flawed. These flaws, if capitalized on, can cause some pretty sticky situations. And I'm not talking robbers and murderers and bullies, no. See, that's simple. And the one thing that people aren't, is simple. That is the shit you see in movies. That's Hollywood. The further you dig into the reasoning and mentality of a person, the more compassionate you become. So I figure you might as well start off that way. I've been a truck driver for 30 years, alright? That's a lot of fucking time. I've seen all my 50 states and several parts of Canada and Mexico. I've been stuck in the snow and ice for almost 90 hours eating the cushion filling from my driving seat out of starvation. Once I didn't talk to anyone for 2 weeks straight. When someone finally responded over the I cried. I bawled. I've had severed heads tossed at my window, I've been robbed at gunpoint. In fact, I bet you couldn't guess how many times I've been shot on the job. It's 8. 8 times. I am a man of compassion. Drug addicts were most of them. They'd come up to my truck wanting cash or food. I'd tell them that I didn't have any, and before you knew it I was on my knees beside my truck or walking down the road with my hands over my head. If it was close it was really shocking. I would jump as that little fucking piece of metal burrowed its way through my ribs. If I were far away it would be a bit different. It's like someone punched you from behind, just kind of knocked the wind out of you. Then the crack came. That horrible fucking crack that rang in the air and in your head. That was always my least favorite part. The worst time I've ever been shot was April the 11th in 84. It was the 5th time. I was at a truck stop about 3 hours southwest of St. Louis. Hell, I can't even remember what the fuck the job was. I knew I was heading to San Diego. I remember that. Anyway, at these truck stops there's usually an assortment of things. There are showers, a haircut salon complete with a pet grooming service, and a mini grocery store. Those bathrooms were huge. You learn to appreciate big rooms when you're out on the road so much. Trust me, those bathrooms were wonderful. Then there'd be the movie room. There's a room of about 20 chairs all aiming at this one old TV on a roll-out stand. Along with the TV there would be a VCR player, and below that, a box with a lock on it. So what you'd do is get the clerk to unlock the box where an assortment of movies rested. It would usually be about 4 to 7 guys sitting there watching movies. You couldn't rewind, you couldn't fast forward, and you damn sure couldn't change the movie. If you showed up in the middle of the show, tough shit. Sit down and watch. That's where I saw her. It was around 9:30 and we were watching The Voice of the Turtle with Ronald Reagan. About an hour and I noticed her. Usually a kid or two would show up for a minute to watch some of the movie as their parents shopped for groceries, or one of the drivers would have a kid. But this girl was just sitting there alone for almost half an hour. She was fucking rancid. Her hair was knotted up like tumbleweed and her skin was caked in horrid filth. She wore an old dress that was too small for her and was faded to the color of her hair. In the middle of it was the outline of what used to be a flower stitched into it. It was long gone. Her eyes were green. Some of the guys tried to talk to her. Just small talk, you know, they were just trying to see what her deal was. Hey honey, what's your name? Where's your family, sweetheart? She didn't say a word. She just stared at them blankly. Someone got the clerk to check on her and of course that didn't help at all. I think that guy ended up dialing child services. But she stuck with me, you know? That rotten little creature staring off with her crusty gray hands tucked underneath her bony thighs, just sitting there with all those tired men. I am a man of compassion, but I never spoke to her. I didn't want to. I just went back to my cabin once the film was over. What was out there waiting for me is what makes my toes cruel hard and my hair want to be torn out of my scalp and fly into the sun. My truck was under a streetlight. All the other cabins seemed to have drifted away from mine for some damn reason, so it was neighboring nothing but fucking darkness. That light served as a bit of a spotlight for some strange stage to set this whole damn event in motion. He had cleaned everything out, the seats, the radio, the mattress, the fan, the shotgun, the steering wheel, the brakes. He had piled it all to the side of my truck and was inside mumbling to himself. Atlas mattress is as soft as his skull. Atlas mattress is as soft as his skull. Atlas mattress is as soft as his skull. I yelled out at him. I didn't know what else to do besides what came to mind. I screamed for him to get out, and then the murmuring stopped. All that rummaging in the cabin stopped. Everything was still. He stormed out with the fires of hell in his eyes. How dare someone interrupt his work? He was as dirty as his daughter inside. His face was ghost white and his clothes were worn to brown paper bags. He wore overalls. I remember that, overalls. His eyes were of blood swimming around two black voids that swallowed it up like juice all up. In his hand was a snub-nosed .38 police special. He stormed at me like he was going to walk through me. He kept gnashing at his lips, biting them hard enough to make them bleed. You could see all the dried blood running down his chin and his neck. The moment that piece of steel was pointing in my direction, it lit up orange. Vam, straight to my heart. Vam, another. Vam, another. Vam. 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 He kept firing that fucker until it was so worn out from clicking that it just died out from sound. I fell to the ground pretending that they weren't blanks so he wouldn't beat the shit out of me. He didn't. Instead, he walked over me like I was a piece of carpet. He stormed off murmuring about Atlas. I'm a compassionate man. When I heard that guy was gunned down by police an hour later about half a mile from where he had put those blanks into me, I felt for him. He left a feral child in the world who would end up dying about a year and a half later. I read it in an article years later. They never reported the cause of death. Not a trucker, I'm an EMT. One of our posts is at a pretty big truck stop. We were posted here one night and I walked inside to go to the bathroom. We usually just stay in the ambulance unless we want a snack or something. I walk into a stall, do my business and walk back out to wash my hands. I look towards the sinks and see a large gentleman, naked from the waist down, washing his very soiled underwear in the sink. Most people would have said fuck it and left without washing their hands. However, since I'm at work and in uniform, I have no choice but to walk up to the sink next to him and bear witness to this atrocity. Fast forward 1 week. I'm at the same truck stop using the bathroom. I walk out of the stall and see another large gentleman pouring condensed Campbell's chicken noodle soup into a bowl and using water from the underwear washing station to dilute his delicious soup. One from my late grandfather who was a trucker, bus driver, trolley driver. Basically if it moved he drove it at some point. This one is from the buses though. He was the bus driver for the local PD's work due. He picks up a load of officers and takes them between pubs for a little while, and on the final pub for the night some of the officers offer him some drinks. He declines, but when the police are telling you to have a drink, it's fine, you just go along with it. So he spent a few hours drinking with the officers in their final stop, and when time comes to leave he is a little tipsy but good to drive. He drove a lot, he drank a lot. He knew when he was not a danger. About 10 minutes after leaving the pub he sees sirens pulling him over. So he stops and panics a little. Officer, on duty, comes to the window and starts the usual "have you had a drink" spiel when one of the officers comes up to the window to greet his boss. They talk for a minute or two when the on-duty officer comes to the window and informs him he is not only good to drive, but he will have a police escort all the way to the depot and a lift home. Years ago I was driving long hauls across the country and back. I had been doing it since the late 70s, and had seen my share of craziness. Nothing like this night though. I was heading east on I-70 through Colorado, in the late evening. Like many times before, I noticed a hitchhiker on the side of the road, but this one caught my eye because it was a female, and she was smoking hot. I pulled over and she got in the truck, and she told me she was headed for NYC. I told her I could get her as far as St. Louis as that was my destination. Almost immediately she noticed all of my radio equipment in the truck. CB radios, scanners, etc. She asked me what it was all for, and I told her that given the right atmospheric conditions, I could talk all over the world with these radios. Her eyes got wide and she told me how she had come here from Belgium and hadn't talked to her mom since she arrived in the US. She asked me if there was any way I could reach Belgium so she could hear her native language. I told her it might be difficult, and she said, I'd give anything to talk to my mother in Belgium. Anything? I answered. Anything. She cooed suggestively. So I looked around for a rest stop, and pulled into a darkened corner, where I proceeded to unzip my pants, and produce my manhood, saying, well, how about this? She grabbed a hold at it with all the confidence of an expert, and immediately yelled, hello mom? Not a trucker, but I was on my way up I-5 in CA from Bakersfield and was headed towards Reading. Stopped at a rest stop near Williams to refuel, take a leak and grab a bite to eat. As I'm fueling up my car, I glance across the pumps and see a tall, hairy, overweight trucker in dirty blue jeans, boots, and a stained white t-shirt that didn't even come close to adequately covering his planetary gut. I notice he's staring at me but think, whatever. And finish refueling. I start walking toward the store to ask for the key to the bathroom when I notice he's still staring fixedly at me and is now making no effort to conceal the fact that he is rubbing a massive erection in his blue jeans. The moment I see this he opens his mouth and from between 2 rows of sweet corn yellow teeth come slithering the words "boy. You got yourself a real pretty mouth." I immediately spun on my heel and marched quickly back to my car, not saying a thing. As soon as my door was shut, I locked the car, started up and drove away as fast as I could. I held my bladder until I got about 25 miles up the road to Willows, looked around thoroughly before even exiting my vehicle and proceeded to go into the gas station and was like a racehorse, all the while making constant furtive glances around the bathroom to ensure I wasn't about to have my O-ring blown out. This happened about 30 years ago. Was on vacation with wife, kids, and my folks. After some reflection, I believe we were on I-80 somewhere in Nebraska. It was a warm, sunny summer afternoon and we pulled into a rest stop for everybody to get out and pee. I remember the place was very busy, lots of cars coming and going, lots of people hustling up to the bathroom, limping along stiff and sore from riding too long. I got done first and ambled out onto the lawn by the bathroom, and was just standing there people watching, waiting for the rest of my family to catch up. Right then a minivan pulls up and parks, the side door sliding open before it came to a full stop. Bunch of teenage, or early 20s kids piled out and headed up the walk. Last out the door was a beautiful girl who looked to be about 19. Clean, wholesome, shapely, gorgeous. She trailed back behind the others and then took off across the parking lot, winding her way behind all the parked trucks, then climbed up on the far side of each cab and knocked on the window. I saw her go from truck to truck to truck, but she got no takers. She finally came back and saw me watching her, slowed down and looked at me with a mildly expectant look on her face. I just slowly shook my head and she turned and walked on. Always kind of wondered about that. She was obviously hustling, but a carload pee break only takes 5 minutes. Don't know how she'd have explained a 15 or 20 minute absence to her van mates unless they were all aware. I was on a road trip to a charity event with my friends when the car breaks down. This was out in nowhere, so I and one of my friends decide to hike it back to the nearest establishment to find a tow truck. We end up at a truck stop and start asking around for help. Oh, by the way, we are both in tuxedos because it was a formal charity event. So yeah, we look out of place to say the least. A trucker flags us down and asks us what we need. We tell him the situation and hop in his truck to get a ride to the nearest tow place. So we're driving in and he pulls into a really dingy motel. My friend and I are pretty uncomfortable at this point, and are thinking about bolting. We ask what we are doing at a motel and he leans over and says, "What do you say we go into one of these rooms and you two boys can crack me open like a coconut? I'll be your mailbox. Just open the slot, and put whatever you want inside." Just then I realized he looked exactly like Tom Sizemore.